talking with Lee Remick, who is going to be featured in what they're kind of calling a mini-series.
Not until I read the script. No, I didn't. I knew about the existence of the book.
Lee Remick wasn't just another actress. She was determined to take on roles that were deep, emotional, and meaningful. But one scene, one single moment, changed everything. It was supposed to make her a global superstar, but instead, it became the turning point that forced Lee Remick to rethink her entire future in Hollywood. And that's just the beginning of her story. Behind the glamour and fame, there was a secret failed marriage, a controversial movie role that hurt her reputation, and the heartbreaking reason she stepped away from Hollywood at the peak of her career. Lee Remick's ascent to fame was not just the result of raw talent, but years of training and determination. Growing up in New York, she immersed herself in theater, ballet, and acting, building a foundation that would set her apart in Hollywood. Her on-screen debut in A Face in the Crowd in 1957 caught the attention of critics, and films like Anatomy of a Murder from 1959 confirmed her ability to craft layered, compelling characters. By the early 1960s, she had cemented her reputation as more than just another Hollywood starlet. She was an actress who could carry heart-wrenching dramas with ease. But climbing to success in Hollywood wasn't without its challenges. As her star rose, the industry's inherent contradictions began to reveal themselves. Lee was often torn between what she wanted in a role and what filmmakers expected of her. Studios marketed her heavily on her looks, branding her as the honey-haired beauty, a label that frustrated her throughout her career. In an interview with Life magazine in 1962, she stated, "I just want to be taken seriously. Beauty fades, but what you bring to a role is what lasts." It was a rare public glimpse into her private discontent with how the industry viewed her. Her big break in Days of Wine and Roses in 1962 offered her the chance to show what she was truly capable of. Playing Kirsten Arneson, a young woman struggling with alcoholism, she dove deeply into the character's emotional struggles. Critics were enamored with her honesty and vulnerability, with one review from the Los Angeles Times calling it a performance so raw and truthful it elevates the entire film. While the role earned her an Academy Award nomination, there were whispers that Jack Lemmon's more dominant role overshadowed her contribution, leaving her feeling both proud yet underappreciated. Outside of these bright moments, the challenges of Hollywood's typecasting loomed. Directors and producers often leaned into her beauty rather than her skill, offering her roles that lacked substance. Even her widely praised role in Anatomy of a Murder led to comments about her looks rather than her performance. It became clear to Lee that she would have to fight harder than her male counterparts to truly be recognized for her talent, something that many actresses of the era struggled with. By the mid-1960s, Lee's frustrations with the industry only grew. While she remained one of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses, she privately expressed concerns about the types of roles available to women at the time. In an interview with the New York Times in 1966, she admitted, "The roles I dream of don't come along often enough, and when they do, there's always a line of actresses waiting for the same part." These words reflected a broader truth about the limitations placed on women in Hollywood, a truth that would soon shape the most difficult moments of her career. By the mid-1960s, Lee Remick had cemented herself as one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. But that success came with a price. As her career progressed, the roles offered to her became increasingly uninspired, designed to fit an image rather than challenge her as an actress. Her beauty, while initially an asset, became a trap. Hollywood repeatedly cast her in roles where her appearance was the focus, ignoring the emotional depth and complexity she was eager to portray. This typecasting didn't just frustrate her professionally, it began to shape her decisions about the projects she took on. One of the clearest examples of this frustration came with her role in The Hallelujah Trail in 1965, a light-hearted Western comedy. Studio executives marketed the film as a big-budget spectacle, but it was poorly received by both critics and audiences, in part because Remick's character was stripped of any real substance. The role reduced her to playing a caricature, a lively suffragette, that lacked the nuance she craved as an actress. While her performance was competent, it left Lee feeling unsatisfied. The New York Herald-Tribune summed up the film's failure by saying, "Its scale is grand, but its characters are paper-thin, with Remick treated as little more than a decoration." It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last time, that she felt underused in a major Hollywood picture. Lee's dissatisfaction with the film was well documented. According to a profile in Life magazine that same year, Lee had grown increasingly critical of roles that focused solely on her appearance. The article quoted her as saying, "I don't think people understand how much effort it takes to find something meaningful in the meaningless." This candid remark reflected her awareness of the superficial nature of many of her projects and her growing determination to strive for more substantive work. The disappointment of the Hallelujah Trail only deepened those feelings. Around this time, Lee also started to notice a shift in Hollywood's priorities. The film industry was entering a new era, one focused on realism and rebellion, epitomized by the rise of younger actresses like Faye Dunaway and Jane Fonda. Lee, while still highly regarded, wasn't necessarily the first choice for these grittier, more daring roles. She began to feel that studios didn't know where to place her in this new wave of filmmaking. As the 1960s came to a close, Lee's frustrations with typecasting had reached a boiling point. She was no longer willing to simply accept roles that reduced her to a beautiful face without depth. While her talent had been undeniable in films like Days of Wine and Roses, it was becoming increasingly clear to her that Hollywood didn't share her vision for her career. This tension would soon lead Lee to seek out new creative opportunities beyond the projects being offered to her, setting the stage for the pivotal moments that would define the next phase of her career. By the late 1960s, Lee Remick was ready for a change. Frustrated by years of superficial roles, she was actively seeking projects that could challenge her and showcase the depth she knew she possessed as an actress. The Detective from 1968, a gritty crime drama starring Frank Sinatra, seemed like the perfect opportunity. Based on a best-selling novel and touching on themes like corruption, moral ambiguity, and sexuality, the film was marketed as a bold step forward for all involved. For Remick, her role as Karen Leland, a troubled, sexually complex woman, appeared to offer exactly the kind of layered, challenging material she had been waiting for. But when the film was released, it quickly became clear that The Detective would not be the career-defining moment she had hoped for. Instead of crafting Karen Leland as a nuanced and sympathetic character, the screenplay reduced her to a flat and sensationalized archetype. Critics pointed out the lack of depth in her role, and audiences were more focused on the provocative subject matter than the performances. A review from the New York Times at the time noted that Karen Leland's character exists more as a device to shock than as a human being, leaving little room for Remick to display her true range as an actress. One particular scene between Remick and Sinatra became notorious. It was meant to be emotionally intense and reveal Karen's psychological struggles, but the way it was staged drew unintended reactions. The camera's lingering focus on Remick's body undercut the intended drama, leading some audiences to laugh at what should have been a pivotal moment in the story. For Lee, the reception to this scene was devastating. Instead of sparking thoughtful discussions about her performance or the themes of the film, much of the attention focused on whether the moment was exploitative or poorly executed. This was yet another example of how the industry's obsession with her appearance continuously overshadowed her talent. A profile in Time magazine from the same year described Lee's reaction to the fallout from The Detective as disillusionment. She had taken the role expecting meaningful character work, but instead found herself at the center of a public conversation about Hollywood's tendency to exploit rather than explore female characters. This wasn't just a professional disappointment, but a deeply personal one. As someone who had long sought to distance herself from the glamour girl label, The way the detective mishandled her role was a harsh reminder of how little control she had over her image in Hollywood. The film's critical reception was mixed, but its treatment of Remick's character specifically drew backlash. For Lee, this was a wake-up call. The project had highlighted the ongoing disconnect between her aspirations as an actress and the roles Hollywood was willing to offer her. In one of her rare candid moments about the industry, she was quoted by Film Daily as saying, "It's exhausting fighting against how the world sees you, especially when it feels like they don't want to see anything else." That disappointment would ultimately drive her to rethink her place in the film industry and shift her focus toward other creative outlets, leading to a notable pivot in her career. The fallout from The Detective marked a turning point in Lee Remick's career. Feeling disillusioned by Hollywood's constant reduction of her talent, where her depth as an actress was ignored in favor of roles that focused on her image, she made a deliberate decision to step away from the confines of the studio system. From this point on, Lee's career trajectory began to shift, both in terms of the types of roles she pursued and the mediums she worked in. One of the first signs of this shift came in the mid-1960s, when she began exploring opportunities in live theater. Unlike film, theater allowed her to take control over her performances in a way Hollywood never had. This newfound creative outlet culminated in her starring role in the Broadway production of Wait Until Dark in 1966, where she played a blind woman targeted by criminals. The play was both a critical and personal success for Remick, earning her a Tony Award nomination. Critics praised her ability to command the stage, with Variety describing her performance as emotionally raw and completely enthralling. Bolstered by this success, Lee continued to diversify her career in the 1970s, leaning heavily into roles for television. This move gave her access to more complex, character-driven projects that Hollywood often overlooked. Her performance in the miniseries The Blue Knight in 1973 earned her significant recognition, including an Emmy nomination. Similarly, her portrayal of Jenny Churchill in Jenny, Lady Randolph Churchill in 1974, showcased a depth and range that earned widespread acclaim. Unlike the caricatures she had been forced to play in Hollywood, these roles gave her the chance to tackle historical and multidimensional characters that resonated with audiences. While television and theater brought her critical praise, Lee hadn't fully turned her back on film. One of her most notable returns to the big screen was in 1976's The Omen. This supernatural thriller marked a stark departure from the dramatic films she had been known for in the past. Playing the mother of a child linked to the Antichrist, Lee brought an understated, believable quality to a genre often dominated by melodrama. The Omen became a surprise commercial hit, grossing over $60 million, and its success reminded Hollywood of her ability to captivate audiences in any genre. However, Lee herself considered the film less important in her overall body of work, emphasizing that it was simply a good script and a good opportunity, as she told the Los Angeles Times in 1977. This career shift wasn't just about new creative opportunities, it was also about control. Lee had grown tired of being boxed into limited roles and saw television and theater as avenues to tell more meaningful stories. By working outside the traditional studio system, she was able to focus on quality instead of typecasting. But this renaissance in her career also signaled a detour from the mainstream blockbuster stardom she had once been positioned for. Her choices reflected a personal desire to prioritize meaningful work over fame, and this new direction, while less high-profile, defined the latter half of her career. Lee Remick's success in theater, television, and diversifying genres was proof that she refused to be constrained by the expectations of the time. Although the fallout from The Detective had impacted her image in Hollywood, it ultimately paved the way for her to forge a career on her own terms.